How's everyone's antennas with this past wind?
It shrank by a whole foot.
Yes, ja nee, hy het maar 'n bietjie gesweet, jong.
Right, Johan, you can go ahead. I've started the recording.
Okay. I see I've got sound. There's a shared screen that I didn't forget this time. Yeah, so we're starting to build radios, which is very awesome. So by the end of August, you should have had all the chapters that will allow you to build a receiver and allow you to build a transmitter. So things should be starting to make sense for everyone. Okay, come on, give me next screen. If I just recap our lecture of Tuesday, where we did oscillators, and the one which we ended up with was the crystal oscillator, and we said, well, crystal oscillators is the heart of any radio. So I've just put a little picture up there for you of a crystal oscillator and a description that says it's a very precise, stable and constant frequency, which is exactly what we want if we start building radios. Just a picture to take you down memory lane. Even I'm a bit young for this one, but yeah, many years ago, and we're talking the 50s, 1950s, if you bought a radio, and this was one of the Rolls-Royce of HF radios in the 50s and the 60s, made by a company called Collins in the USA. But when you bought this HF receiver, you told them which frequencies you want to operate on. And then, depending on what frequencies you gave them, they sent you a toolbox full of crystals. So in all these little gray pockets, there's a crystal in every single pocket. And you can see this one tells you could operate 3.4 to 3.6 megahertz. This one was 3.6 to 3.8 megahertz. So you received this bag of crystals with your radio, and obviously you didn't have that many sockets in your radio for crystals, so the lid of this radio just lifted up quite easily, and depending on what frequencies you wanted to operate on, which time of year it was, what the sunspot conditions were, you would determine which frequency bands you were going to operate. And then you would plug crystals in sockets inside the radio that would allow you to operate there. So this is typically, in the old days, you had a crystal oscillator and it limited you to a frequency. So just a picture down memory lane for you. Obviously, things have changed, thank goodness. I can't see myself opening my radio every day and swapping crystals. So things have changed over time. And in radios, we find things which they call multipliers. They have got things which they call dividers. Then they've got things which they call mixers. And the last one we will cover tonight is something called synthesizers. So these four things are basically used to manipulate my crystal oscillator's frequency. Your handbook says frequency translation. Yeah, okay, it's also another term for it, but I would like to rather call it frequency conversion or frequency manipulation. And we're going to look at these four things which we use in radios to manipulate the crystal oscillator frequency. We've just got one problem. Okay. If you go back to the lecture on sine waves and things like that, you will see that on the screen is an absolute perfect looking sine wave. She's got curves in all the right places. Nothing is drooping. Nothing is hanging. It's a perfect sine wave if I look at it in the time domain. If I look at it in the frequency domain, I've got one single frequency at 1 kilohertz. Now, I'm sure when you did this lecture some weeks ago, in amateur radio, looking at signals in the time domain is actually not very useful for us as amateurs. We always look at our signals in terms of the frequency domain. So if we look at the standing wave ratio of our antenna, if we look at the output spectrum of our radio, everything we always look at the signal in terms of the frequency domain. But I've put both of them up for you so you can see where the difference is. That one's in time, this one's in frequency. So this is a perfect 1 kilohertz sine wave. The problem with this is it's not very useful if we want to start multiplying it. So in other words, let's say we want to make the 1 kilohertz 2 kilohertz, we're going to struggle like hell to multiply it to become 2 kilohertz. So we look at another signal. Again, on top is our time domain sine wave. You can see it's a sine wave. But the one that's more useful for us here is the bottom one, which gives me my signal in terms of the frequency domain. And here's my fundamental. In this case, well, it's just a picture that I managed to get. It's 549 hertz is the fundamental. So I've got a second harmonic, which would roughly be about 1.1 kilohertz. And a third, come on cursor, and a third and a fourth and a fifth, etc. So this sine wave is not very pure. It's been, it's like mixing rum with raspberry and getting rum and raspberry, or brandy and cola. I've modified the sine wave to give me harmonics, because I need these harmonics if I want to multiply my frequency to a higher one. So in this case, the second harmonic is a very good one. So this signal would make a very good times 2 or a times 4 multiplier. Okay, because the second and the fourth harmonic is actually both at a very good level. If I look at another signal, and here I've really butchered my sine wave, I've made it into a sort of a quasi square wave. So that gives me my fundamental frequency here at 1 kilohertz. And now if you can see this, the second harmonic is way down. It's 60, yeah, about 60 dB, 62 dBs lower than my fundamental frequency. But this is the nice one. The third harmonic is only about, what shall we say, 5 dBs, 10 dBs down from my fundamental frequency. So in other words, if I want to multiply by 3 or I want to multiply by 5, this will be a very good signal to give me that multiplication. Okay, so if we look at multipliers, just to recap, this signal will make a lousy signal to multiply with. This one will be a good signal to multiply even numbers. And this one will be an excellent signal to multiply odd frequencies or odd numbers. Let's rephrase that, odd numbers. Okay. So remember this when we move onwards. See, there's somebody else to admit. Okay. Don't know, is this first bit clear, or is there somebody that doesn't understand what I covered in the first couple of slides?
I just want to find out, why would you multiply it? If you can just explain the multiplication for it.
Okay, let's go, sorry, back here. Okay, let's say my crystal oscillator is operating at 1 kilohertz. But I actually need my crystal oscillator to operate at 2 kilohertz. Or I can say 1 megahertz and I want it to operate at 2 megahertz. Okay. I can either change the crystal, going from 1 megahertz to 2 megahertz, which is what happened in the old days. They didn't have multipliers, so what they did, you had to change crystals all the time to change the frequency. So in modern radios, I don't want to change crystals anymore, so I want to jump from, let's say, 1 megahertz to 2 megahertz. So I would use a multiplier, a times 2 multiplier, to take my frequency to 2 megahertz.
All right.
But
Okay. I'm with you.
you with me? So to do that, I need an unpure signal. I don't know what other term I can use for you, but I don't need a perfect signal. A perfect signal doesn't multiply well. I actually need something that has been diluted or, has been made impure to multiply with. And in this example, as I said, this will make a good times 2 or times 4 multiplier, and this one will make a good times 3 or times 5 multiplier.
All right. Great. I'm with
Okay.
you. Thank you.
You with me? Anything else?
So Jan, this would also then be on the same principle for your antennas. You can then get sort of the second harmonics in a long wire sort of thing, yeah?
Yes, but you are screwing up your waveforms.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
But it is obviously achievable.
It is achievable,
And
yes.
and you obviously antenna
Yeah.
tuner tweak it.
What you gain on the swings, you lose on the slides.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can have a 40-meter antenna resonate to 20 meters, but your wave shape, your radiation pattern goes for a ball of smelly stuff.
Okay. The truth comes out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's look at, and this one's in your book, that's why I've put it up there, is the rectifier doubler. So in other words, if I put 1 megahertz in on this side, I'm going to get 2 megahertz out on this side. Okay. Now, if you go back to the lecture we had on resonant circuits, this is the first thing you need to make sure of, that you have a tank circuit which operates, let's go back here. You have a tank circuit that resonates at twice the frequency of the input. Because what is going to, this again is with the pictures you see here is the ideal world. They don't always look this well. It's just to demonstrate the concept to you. So the one diode would give me these halves of the signal. The other diode will give me these halves of the signal. And if I combine them, I get twice the frequency of what I've put into the device. It doesn't always look that perfect, but for explanation's sake, so that you understand, this is a typical diode, rectifier diode doubler. But the critical part is this output tank circuit needs to resonate correctly at twice the input frequency. Otherwise, I'm not going to get this. I'm going to get garbage looking stuff. Okay, and this is more realistic of what it typically looks like. You can see that the output waveform is really, looks like somebody dinged it with a hammer at the bottom. So the black is my input signal, and the red is my output signal after the tank circuit. So you can already see it's not a good looking sine wave, but it will do for what we do, because what we do now, all these multipliers and dividers, we have to use filters. Remember our lecture on filters? So I have to put the signal through a filter to get rid of all the remaining harmonics that there are. Because I can tell you now, with this flat bottom, this thing is going to have good third and fifth and seventh harmonics in. So to get rid of that, I have to use a bandpass filter that allows only this 2 megahertz or whatever the frequency is that we wanted, to allow that through the filter. The other thing with multipliers, dividers, mixers, you lose always. And you can see it clearly in this picture. The input is 2.4 volts. My output is only 0.6 of a volt. So I've got to put a buffer again to amplify my signal again. So filter, buffer to get it back to a reasonable level again. So although it's multiplying, I'm losing power, I'm losing voltage. I filter and I buffer again to up it to where it's supposed to be. Okay. Next one that's also in your manual is what they call the push-pull tripler. It's a bit confusing to understand how it works. The only thing to remember, and I read the part that's in your manual, Again, my tank circuit, this capacitor, this inductor, my tank circuit has got to be designed to resonate at 3 times the input frequency. Okay, that's the first thing to remember. Tank circuit resonates at exactly 3 times the input frequency. This one, I always put in a square wave. If we go back, let's just go back here. You see, this is why I put this one up for you. If we want a third or a 3 times or a 5 times multiplication, we actually use a square wave because it suppresses the equal harmonics and it only allows the odd harmonics to go through. So if I look at this now, if I put square waves in here, it means that this tank circuit will then give me an output which is 3 times the input frequency. If we look at it again in time domain, you can see the red is my input signal. Remember I said we put in a square wave. Okay, that's my input signal, and the output signal, the blue one, is exactly 3 times the input frequency of my multiplier. Again, I lose. Look at the input voltage. It's what's it? Let's say it's 5 volts. It's 5 volts peak to peak, and I'm getting out 1 volt peak to peak after multiplication. I always lose. I never gain. So again, this has got to go through a filter, because what you can see here, if you look carefully, you will see that all these peaks are going up and down slightly. And if you look at it carefully, that up and down slightly of these blue peaks would coincide with these ones. So there's still in the output frequency, although it's 3 times the fundamental input, there is components left of the fundamental frequency. So I've got a filter and I've got a buffer to get rid of it. Okay, so that's the push-pull tripler that's also in your manual. Thing to remember, if I double, I use the equal harmonics of my fundamental, and if I triple, I use the odd harmonics of my fundamental. Okay, now we get to another one, which we will see later why, which is called a frequency divider. So instead of going up, I want to go down. So let's say I've got 100 megahertz and I want 10 megahertz out of it, or I want 5 megahertz out of it. I would use a divider. And typically they use a logic device which they call a flip-flop. So what happens is every time my clock signal goes, in this case, my clock signal goes from positive to negative, okay, the flip-flop will change state. Okay, so this is the clock input. So you see, there it goes down. My flip-flop changes state and that goes high. And it stays high until the clock goes down again. So already I have half of my input frequency available at this point of the divider. This one would give me divide by 4, and that one would give me divide by 8. Now you're going to ask me, but why on earth would I want to bloody well divide a crystal oscillator's frequency? Any oscillator's got error. It's got a fundamental error. It drifts. It's accurate to a certain amount of what they call parts per million stability. Okay. Now, if I divide my oscillator frequency, okay, let's take it this way. Let's say I've got 2 oscillators. I've got a 10 megahertz oscillator that is 10 ppm accurate, and I've got a 100 megahertz oscillator that's also 10 ppm accurate. So they both have the same accuracy. But if I divide the 100 to a 10 megahertz value, I'm going to have an accuracy of 1 ppm. So it will be a more stable signal than the 10 megahertz oscillator running at 10 ppm. And when we do the synthesizers, we'll discuss it again and then it may make a bit more sense to you. But frequency dividers is mostly used to improve drift and some other things inside my radio. Okay, if I look at it, a divider is always a square wave device. So I've got a square wave coming out. The first one, this is all the stages. You'll see it's every time half the frequency of the top one. I've got to filter them, got to put them through a filter, and I've got to buffer them so that I'm back to a sine wave where I want to be. So the blue is the output typically of the divider stages, and the red would be the output after filter and after buffer. I get a beautiful looking curvy sine wave again. Okay, that's dividers. Where we was time. Sorry, just checking. And having a sip of coffee. Okay, now we get to Stefan in. We get to frequency mixers. This is now another one. Why do we have all these funny things? When we start building the radios, hopefully a lot of the blocks will fall into place. I mean, all you're doing is going through puzzle blocks at the moment. And I think next week or the week after, we start putting the puzzle together with all the blocks we've got. Mixers. A mixer converts a frequency for me to either a higher frequency or a lower frequency. So if I have a normal transistor mixer or a FET mixer, which is in your manual, I have one frequency there and I have another frequency there. So I've got two frequencies which are going in together to the same transistor. So do I confuse the hell out of the poor guy? Yes, most probably. Because the output coming out of this transistor will be the two frequencies added together and the two frequencies subtracted from each other. Okay, so let's look at that in more detail. 10 megahertz, 100 megahertz. Okay, so if I put 10 megahertz and 100 megahertz into this mixer, on the output I'm going to have 110 megahertz and I'm also going to have 90 megahertz. So I've got 110 and I've got 90. That's why I have to filter. Now I've got to decide, do I filter the 90 megahertz? Which one do I want, the 90 megahertz or the 110 megahertz? We'll do it later. If it's a receiver, I want the 90 megahertz, the lower one. If it's a transmitter, I want the higher one. Okay. And we'll see that in a couple of slides. What they don't tell you in the manual, you've actually also got some components of the low frequency injection and the RF frequency also available, apart from the product of the sum and the difference of the two frequencies. But for your sake, a mixer, you either have the two added together or the two subtracted from each other. If we look at it, come on, in terms of pictures, which should hopefully help, you can see these two frequencies. They are, input 1 is a higher frequency than input 2, but they are both there. And the output in this case is the subtraction of the two, which is this signal you see here. Boom, 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 boom. That one that gives me the rhythm, the wave. That's the subtraction of the two components from each other. The addition of the two gives me these little wigglies that's going along all the time. Okay, so that's typically what the output of a mixer looks like. That's why we need to filter, because I either need to pick the low frequency component or I've got to pick the high frequency component. So if you can picture it for yourself, if I add these two together, so if I would mathematically take each point over time and I add them together, I should get these little squigglies that you see going along. Choof, 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 choof. And if I subtract the two from each other, I should get this wave, the motion going on. Okay, so if I have a low pass filter, I'm going to end up with a sine wave that sits here. And if I use a high pass filter, I'm only going to end up with this little squigglies without this wave in between. Okay, now you're going to ask me what's the difference between, let's look at this first, sorry, then we will do that one. This is just in terms of a frequency domain, perhaps makes it a bit clearer for you. I have two signals, one at 0.75 megahertz and one at 1 megahertz. These are my two signals going into the mixer. So if I subtract them from each other, I end up with a frequency component at 0.25. And if I add them together, I sit with a frequency component at 1.75 megahertz. So typically this is in a receiver and this will be used in a transmitter. So now you're going to ask me, why don't I just divide or multiply? Why do I have to mix two signals together? A couple of things. You have a broader selection of frequencies to mix together, where multiplication gives you fixed values, in other words, times 2 or times 4. Okay? With mixers, you have more options available, more changes or more ranges that you have available. And the other thing which is important, if I had modulation on one of these signals, let's say this input has got modulation on, okay? If I divide the frequency, I'm also going to divide my modulation. So in other words, I'm going to weaken my modulation. If I put it through a mixer, I do not lose my modulation. My modulation remains at the same level it was before I put it through the mixer. So anything that I want to maintain modulation, I would rather use a mixer than a multiplier or a divider. Okay, this one is also in your book, double balanced mixer. Same principle, exactly the same as the one before. I've got a low frequency input coming from my local oscillator. This is what LO actually stands for. It stands for local oscillator. RF is my radio frequency input or output, could be either one of the two. And IF is my intermediate frequency. Okay. So the intermediate frequency will be the difference between the two as well as the addition of the two. The reason why they use double balanced instead of this horrible animal, you have this one compared to this one, it's got much lower distortion, it's isolated, and there's much less harmonics in the output. If you really look at a mixer's output, it's not as beautiful as this. There's fingers everywhere because multiple things add and subtract with each other. So you end up with really a horrible looking graph. This is the textbook graph that you see here. So if you use a double balanced mixer, there's a lot less harmonics in the output of the mixer. Okay, we said we use mixers in radios, so where the hell do we use it now? So let's look at this in real life, practical for you. This side is a receiver. It's a receiver. So I've got an antenna. I've got some form of an amplifier that amplifies the signal which is coming in from my antenna. And it goes into a balanced mixer. This is what this circle with a cross means. And I've got a local oscillator here, and the output of my mixer goes through a filter. So in this case, I would use the subtraction of the two frequencies. So in other words, this could be, for example, 100 megahertz, and this could be 99 megahertz, and then I use the subtraction, which is 1 megahertz. Okay. On the other side, if we build transmitters, we want to do the opposite. We've got a low frequency here and another frequency here. We put it through a balanced mixer, and we use the addition of the two. So let's say we've got 50 megahertz and 50 megahertz, just as an example. If we add them together, we get 100 megahertz. We put it through the filter, put it through the amplifier, and out to my antenna. Now, this signal coming from here would typically have my modulation on, and we'll still do modulation. It's one of the modules. But my information that I'm transmitting is on this frequency, and this is purely a crystal oscillator that is mixing with my IF frequency. So if I use a mixer, I don't suppress or change the value of my modulation. Okay, so this is a real life example of why I say everything is puzzle blocks at the moment for you. We use a mixer in the receiver and we use a mixer in the transmitter, but for different reasons. Yeah, we could have used a multiplier as well. But the problem with a multiplier is I would then change my modulation information by the same multiplication value. So what they sometimes do, they would use a multiplier on the local oscillator side. So let's say this is running at 5 megahertz. They would multiply it by 2 to get 10 megahertz to put into the mixer, because there's no modulation present on the local oscillator frequency. The same with this one. There's no modulation information present on this local oscillator channel. It's only present on the RF channel coming in from the antenna. Okay, I hope people are understanding. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. That's why I say it's frequency manipulation. This is a wonderful piece of equipment. Jan van Riebeeck and General Smuts would have loved to have this in their radios during the Second World War. This is the thing that changed modern, well, one of the things that have changed modern communications forever. If you go back to your old, I don't know how old some of you are, but if in the old days you had a, sorry, let me just shut this 2-meter rig down. In the old days, you had a radio and you had this knob you used to turn. And inside the radio was a piece of string with a red needle on. And as you were turning this knob, this needle moved to the frequency that you wanted to listen to. Okay? That's all because frequency synthesizers didn't exist. Nowadays, if you even your car radio, it shows you digitally what the frequency is that you're listening to. You're listening to Groot FM or Bosveld Stereo or whatever. It shows you the frequency. Why? Because of the modern age of frequency synthesizers. So, how does this animal work? Let's go through it bit by bit. It's not difficult. It's easy, like falling off a chair. Again, I've got my crystal oscillator. Remember, we said that's the thing that needs to be there that's stable. Okay. So this crystal, in this example, it's running at 10 megahertz. And I'm putting it through a frequency divider to get 1 megahertz. Why? Because we said this thing's stability could be, as an argument, 10 parts per million that it drifts. And if I divide it by 10, If I divide it by 10, I would also divide the drifting or the error in the oscillator. I would divide that by 10 as well. So I'm turning a 10 parts per million oscillator into a 1 part per million. Or if I have a 1 part per million oscillator, I'm turning it into a 0.1 part per million stable oscillator frequency. So that's why I do this. They always do it nowadays. It's just to reduce the error, reduce phase noise. There's a lot of reasons why, but the primary one is that the error is reduced. Also, if this thing oscillates at 10.001 megahertz, if I divide it by 10, it becomes 1.00000 something megahertz. So my error is also reduced by 10. Everything gets reduced by 10, which is an advantage. Okay. Now, if I power up this thing. I have a voltage controlled oscillator. Remember, we did VCOs when we did the oscillator lecture. So here's my VCO, puzzle blocks. Okay. I've got my VCO. It starts off and it generates a frequency. This frequency, and in this case, they've just used an example. They said we're interested in the 100 megahertz output frequency. Okay. That goes into a divider, which divides it by 100. So on this side, I've got 1 megahertz coming out. So I had 100 megahertz coming in, which came out the VCO. It became 1 megahertz, and it goes down to what they call a phase comparator. Now, the phase comparator does two things. It checks the phase of this 1 megahertz signal against the phase of this 1 megahertz reference for frequency as well as for phase. And if the two are not in harmony, if they're not a happily married couple, there's an error. And the more the two in this wedding or in this marriage is disagreeing, the bigger this error is going to be. The more the two signals are in phase and in frequency, the less this frequency error is going to be. We'll look at some pictures now after this, but just for you to understand. Then this error signal is not a DC value. Remember when we did VCOs, I control the frequency of my VCO with a DC voltage. Okay, so now I need a DC voltage. So I've got to turn this error signal, which we'll see why, into a DC value that changes the VCO oscillator frequency. Until, and this keeps on going until there's harmony. Okay. Once this 1 megahertz signal and this 1 megahertz signal is exactly in phase and they are in perfect harmony, there's no error signal. This thing is oscillating in synchronization. It's locked. They use the term, the phase lock loop is in its locked state. So in other words, it's happy, everything is fine. Okay, now I want to change to another radio station, which is sitting on 105 megahertz as an example. Okay, so now I have to change this divider's division ratio to 105. Because remember, I need to get 1 megahertz coming out. So it doesn't matter what goes in, I need 1 megahertz coming out. So if I want to listen to another station at 105 megahertz, I change the division to 105. I still get a megahertz out. And if this megahertz and this megahertz is in perfect harmony, happily married, I don't have an error signal. If there's an error signal, it gets converted into a DC voltage by my loop filter. And it changes the voltage controlled oscillator frequency until 105 megahertz divided by 105 gives me 1 megahertz. The two are happily married. Okay, so that's the principle of a synthesizer. Actually as easy as falling off a chair. So what they do in your modern car radio, there's a microcomputer inside your car radio that changes this division ratio all the time. So if I want to listen to another radio station, it says, okay, I've got to divide by 108 now. So I change the dividing ratio by 100 to 108. So this is still a megahertz, but this becomes 108 now, until there's harmony and these two signals are the same. So it's easy. I have a crystal oscillator. I divide it so that I improve my errors, more accurate. I compare it with an output of a divider network. If there's an error, I convert it into DC, in other words, a DC voltage, and that controls a voltage-controlled voltage-controlled oscillator until everything is locked in sync. Okay. Whew, let's look at some pictures. Okay, top one, example of a locked phase lock loop. This is the reference 1 megahertz. This is the 1 megahertz coming out the divider. They are in perfect sync. I don't have any output error of any sort. So there's my two sine waves that I get after my filtering. So again, the phase lock loop's output has also got filters on to make a square wave back into a perfect sine wave. So that's it. It's in locked. The two are in perfect harmony. Here I've got a problem. My reference signal and my input frequency signal is not in sync. So this is typically what a comparator, phase comparator output looks like. Every time there's a disparity between the two, there's an output. Okay. Where the two are in sync, there is no output. So this is typically what comes out my phase comparator. And I've got to convert it into a DC voltage, which then would pull these two signals until they look like this. So it would change the oscillating frequency of the VCO until it is locked again and they are in sync and harmony. Another way to represent it is, this is typically what happens when I turn on the power, or if I change frequency. If I now decide I want to listen to another radio station on 105 FM, the moment I do that, I upset the apple cart. So it goes all over the place. So the blue signal is my output of the VCO, and the red signal is my error. Okay. So you can see the moment my output is not in sync anymore with my reference oscillator, I get a large error signal, and this then gets smaller and smaller as I approach the point where the phase lock loop is synchronized or it's in lock. The moment it's in lock, I don't get any output error anymore. So this is in time just a way to look at it as well, which may help with that other one. Okay, synthesizer is done. A difficult one, but I hope everybody grasped it. Any questions? Ish, silence.
Taking it all in.
Taking it all in. Luckily, the lectures are on the drive available to you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's once you understand this block diagram, it's fairly easy. These ones you have to just know because they are in your exams or in your manuals. And I expect they may ask a question on them as well. You don't use much of these things in modern radios anymore. When we do radios, you will understand why I say you don't really use them. But the Ooms that wrote the manual must probably used Collins HF radios in their younger days. Yeah, so, yeah. But this is the crux of these two things. This is an important one for you. You'll see when we do receivers and transmitters, it's still used in modern transceivers. Mixers, you can't do away with it because it gives you a lot of other benefits. It gives you image rejection. It gives you bandpass characteristic. There's so many things we'll do with mixers when we do transceivers. So you still need them. But the problem is you need the local oscillator frequency. So to get this local oscillator frequency, I would typically then use a synthesizer. So this output here after the filter and the buffer. So remember, F out goes through a filter and it goes through a buffer, an amplifier. And once it's gone through the filter and the buffer amp, it would then become this local oscillator frequency or this local oscillator frequency. And you can already see for yourself, let's say on receive, I need 100 megahertz. On transmit, I need 140 megahertz as an example, just as examples, okay? So this little microcontroller that manages my radio sits there and it says, okay, Henry's busy receiving. He needs 100 megahertz, so we divide by 100. Then he sees Henry is pushing the press to talk button on the microphone. He wants to transmit. Oh, now Henry needs 145 megahertz coming out. Change the divider quickly to 145 megahertz, and this thing takes microseconds to lock, and Henry's got his 145 megahertz signal for transmit. He lets go of the PTT, the micro picks up again, or he now wants to receive, change the division to 100 quickly, and I've got my thing synced within seconds, within microseconds again. So this is typically what happens then, yeah. So when he's receiving, the output of the synthesizer could be, as an example, 100 megahertz, and when he's transmitting, the output of the synthesizer could be 145 megahertz. Because it's all controlled by computer, it happens instantaneously, faster than you can think. Okay. Henry, you want to do questions tonight?
Yes, welkom om het te doen, Johan.
Okay, let's do questions then. Sorry, let's just double check. Where are we now? Okay. Is there any questions before we go to the questions in your book? Is there anything you want me to repeat for you? I see some people have fallen off the conversation since we started. Okay. Let's go. A frequency multiplier stage is generally, okay, A, B, C, or D?
That'd be A.
Yes, it is always biased in nonlinearity. One thing to think of when you see this question in the exam paper, just think back of what I gave you. I said, we don't want pure sine waves going into multipliers. We actually want abused or modified or damaged sine waves going into multipliers, okay? So that should trigger you to think immediately. Things that are not linear is generally not in a straight line from A to B. So if you see this question and you get stuck, just think of it. What did Johan say? We needed an unpure sine wave, nonlinearity.
Yeah,
Okay, the circuit.
Sorry, the last three just didn't make sense. I just narrowed it down to A. So good guess.
Yes, okay. It doesn't make sense either. Yes.
It was one of those freebies, maybe.
Yes, but just technically to think it through in the exam, multipliers want non-pure sine waves.
100%.
Okay. The circuit forming the basis of a frequency synthesizer is called A. I mean, this one also is a freebie, 5% extra. Where's our our friend from China with his 5% freebie? Okay, it's a phase lock loop. Frequency multiplication is often used in UHF transmitters. This is commonly achieved by applying RF power to diodes and tuned circuits. Such a device is
I think it's the A, the Rector multiplier.
multiplier. Yes, it's A. Okay.
I see there's a hand up. I don't know if it's...
Sorry, Joe. I must just turn to my other screen to see the hands. Joe, I'm listening.
Yeah, don't worry. It's been on the first question. It's okay.
Yeah, now ask your question. Sorry, I've got to turn around to see my other screen.
Oh, I was about that one on the first question to answer. That one on the frequency multiplier stage is generally...
Nonlinearity.
That's right.
Yeah. Hopefully I explained it to you good.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Where are we now? 4. The reference frequency of a phase-locked loop frequency synthesizer is 10 Hertz. Okay, and the programmable divider is set to divide by 315000. The synthesized frequency will be...
I got 3,15 megahertz.
3,1, where are we now?
I don't know if that's right.
It's 10 Hertz, 3,15 megahertz. Okay, where are we now? We are finished with 4. I just want to do this. 5. The let's move this up. The cut-off frequency of a low-pass filter in a PLL frequency synthesizer would typically be...
I think it's lower than the reference frequency.
Yes, it's got to be lower than the reference frequency. Okay. What they typically do is they just use a resistor and a capacitor filter to perform that function. But it is lower than the reference frequency. 6, a frequency multiplier could be used with the following signal without creating objectionable distortion.
FM signal.
Yeah. FM.
Yes. Remember we said multipliers damage the modulation or the information. Okay. So if anything that is amplitude modulated will automatically get multiplied as well. Okay. Frequency modulated signals, we would change the amount of modulation, but we won't change the modulation frequency. So it is 6B. Just remember, with multipliers, anything specifically stuff with amplitude modulation information, which is A, C, and D, would really get distorted. Then 7, a local oscillator signal at 10 megahertz is mixed with a 14 megahertz signal using a perfect double balanced mixer. The output of the mixer will contain the following frequencies.
C.
C. Remember the difference between them. So 14 minus 10 is 4 megs. And the sum of them, 10 plus 14 is 24. Okay. I still don't agree with them because actually the answer is B, but I've put in there the wording using a perfect double balanced mixer. Because even a normal double balanced mixer will give me some other frequencies as well, but using the mathematical term perfect double balanced mixer, it's only 4 and 24. Okay, 8. Which of the following circuits can be used to change the frequency of an amplitude modulated signal?
Mixer.
A mixer, yes. Okay. As well as mixing products, the output of a single balanced mixer will contain.
Is it both of the input signals?
As well as the mixing products, the output of the the single balanced mixer will contain. Okay. Okay, it will be 9B. It will always have one of the input signals
one.
present as well. This is actually, it's in the manual. So this, I don't know, it could be an exam question as well. But remember, they're using the term single balanced mixer. So one of the input signals will also be there with the output of the mixer products. That should have actually, well, they're asking as well as the as well as the mixing products. So they're already terming the plus and the subtraction is there. You'll have one of the input signals. A switching mixer operates by reversing the polarity of one of the a switching mixer operates by.
Doesn't it do it accurately multiplying two sine wave signals together? No. Right. So,
If you hear the word switching, you can already assume that it's some form of a square wave.
okay. All right.
Okay, that's a hint
So
for
then-
you. So if you go back to our,
Then it must be A.
then
makes more
it's
sense.
A, yes. It's
Yeah.
reversing the polarity. So
Yes,
if they
yeah.
use words like switching, what else can they use? It normally refers to square waves or not a sine wave. Okay, that's it. That's the questions. And then on next week, Tuesday, we meet again and we will start with modulation. Another nice one.
Dan sê Johan, ek stop hier opname.
Okay.